You're going to kick it off? Martin will introduce you, but you will be the first knowledge person to share some knowledge. And then Jim. Jim, I told you
we're going to start right away, so if you're coming in, come in.
That Jim would be the second person, right? I think it's interesting to mix in and out. Perfect.
Tell me when we're ready to go.
She's a rebel in the group, I can tell. Everybody! Wait, let's get Katie in there, too. My arm is not so long. Get that funny guy. That funny guy over there. Wait, funny guy. Hey. I can only speak like that because he's my husband. But now everybody knows he's a funny guy at home. Yeah. And I'm going to start.
Okay. Are you coming up to the... Yeah, come now, because we're starting. We're going live. Come on up if you're coming up. Hi. Come join us. You going to come join us or no? Are you good for me?
I will be there.
Yeah, because we're starting right now.
Then... And then we do Tibet again there, and then...
Tomorrow we got two more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me know when you're ready. Exactly.
I think that's good. We're just, everything is ready. We're just going to let it flow, whatever else comes in.
You confirm YouTube, Facebook, everybody's...
Let's take more pictures. So Losang, you will be fourth. I think it's
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To have Che. Okay.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on the planet. To our live stream audience, welcome to the Clark Room of the Explorers Club on this first day of the Permanent Forum the United Nations is hosting on Indigenous Issues. We are pleased and proud to present a host of guests that have come from all over the globe to join us and discuss education, ecotourism, and human rights in the Arctic. But to get a little bit of perspective, we have two of our speakers who will be joining us virtually, Jim Enote and Losang Rugby. The first, a Zuni tribal member, Jim Enote, who has done wonderful work with the Colorado Plateau Foundation, supporting Indigenous people in the Colorado Plateau region, and Losang Rugby, who has been an innovator and a pioneer in education in Tibet. If you look around this room, the very fibers of the paneling in these walls emanate Scott, Perry, Amundsen, Shackleton. If you look at the ice sledge that's above you, this is the ice sledge that Perry and Henson took to the North Pole. If you look behind us, there are flags that Tor Heyerdahl took on Kon-Tiki. The Apollo mission flags are back here. So this is a room filled with history, and it's appropriate that now that we have this history, that we can bring this forum of education and voices that seldom are heard to this panel. We have in our front row guests from Greenland, Aviak Hensen, who's the great-granddaughter of Matthew Hensen. We have Paningwak Jensen, an innovator and tattoo artist in her own right. And we have Nabarana Kaviak Sorensen, who I've known since she was a little girl, because she's always a little girl. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to a discussion that we think is going to be both fruitful, engaging, and exciting for all of us. Because of the nature of the workshop and the number of speakers that we have, we're going to relegate most of the talk to the speakers themselves in discussion. And just as a few housekeeping notes, for those of you online, you should address your questions to Kathy at stanford.edu, Stanford as in the university. This will be the easiest way to get questions. You can address them at any time during the workshop. We will be collecting them, and unfortunately we'll be looking at all of them, only being able to select probably a few for this forum. For those of you who are live here, there are cards and pencils. You are welcome to jot any questions down, pass them to your left, and Kathy will collect them. And that, during the forum, will be the process that we proceed. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Pamela Peters, who will be our moderator this morning. And Pamela is an eco hero in her own right, but her program to really regenerate and revive kids, now the program in 6 countries, is really the brainchild of this woman. She's a sustainable strategist, graduating from the Vrije Universiteit Libre de Brussels, also a fellow of that institution as well, having received 2 master's degrees. And I must say, I have survived both being airlifted out of the Amazon for an infection that I would have perished from, and have also gotten bitten by fire coral in Micronesia. But Pamela has outdone that because she has actually survived in the high Arctic in a small tent with me. So, with that, I introduce Pamela to get us started on this journey, and we look forward to a lively conversation, and thank you all for showing up.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, for a fabulous introduction, and thank you for the audiences at home. It's a real honor to be addressing you and to be sharing knowledge from an amazing group of people. And as an environmental economist, I am known to create bridges. I create bridges between Mother Earth, the language of Mother Earth, and towards the current paradigm that dictates the way we should think. And in a world where polarization is so extreme, the only way forward is to create bridges. So we're going to work on a hybrid model. We're going to integrate voices of indigenous origin who basically are the key holders to our survival, but we don't find their voices in curricula. On the other spectrum, we also have a second theme, and that is going to focus on ecotourism. We have experts from ecotourism from Canada, from Iceland and Greenland, and so they're going to be actually representing the pulse of the moment. How does the integration of indigenous and Inuit voices look like in today's curricula, and therefore allow them to also stream towards jobs? So we have a whiteboard. We're going to write some keywords as well that we're going to use in that development of that curriculum. I myself have a curriculum to become eco-heroes, not in 5 but 11 countries already. And so we're just going to add layer and layer and layer until we have found our balance again on a human level, on the level of the global economy, and that will also, of course, please Mother Earth, our dear Earth Mother, who is alive and kicking, and therefore we're very happy to also include some voices from Jim Inote and, of course, from Losang. We were going to give the floor now to a fabulous person, Jason Edmonds. You want to introduce a bit more about Jason?
No, I wanted to, before we got too far in the conversation, to acknowledge and recognize the real sustainability experts in the room, the Indigenous people. I think it's time we start listening to their voices on how to care for a planet instead of perhaps the experts. So with that, let's keep moving on.
Okay. Jason, you are an encyclopedia of experiences. Your father passed on a lot of knowledge. The floor is yours to give the audiences a glimpse of the way you think and therefore how you have created your reality. Maybe a little bit different than other people, but so important.
Thank you. It's funny, that's a very deep question, and I haven't been on stage in a very long time. And so I'm glad we have these extra big pamphlets for blocking. My name is Jason Edmonds. I'm Inuk from Nunatsiavut, which is in northern Labrador. And I work with a company called Adventure Canada. We offer small ship expeditions throughout the Canadian Arctic, Greenlandic Arctic, and into Northern Europe as well. My path into this kind of organization, this kind of business, was a very good example, I think, of what we want to set up today. Is when I started working at Adventure Canada, I was a forklift operator for many, many years, and getting into this line of work was quite difficult, with a lot of kind of my own capacity building needs. Even though I did have some experience as a polar bear monitor when I was a young person. But through Adventure Canada, I gained a lot of experience. Now I lead many of their expeditions throughout the Arctic. And through that experience, it really opened my eyes to Indigenous leadership throughout this region. I mean, in the industry of expedition cruising, I started to really see how little Inuit were involved in that type of programming, and through that, you learn about the gaps in education and expectations to fill such a role. And it kind of really fascinated me, so I started to kind of pick up on it a little bit more. And since then, I've started doing some consulting with organizations on how to... There's always this big idea that we need to build the capacity of Indigenous people to meet our needs. There's rarely reflection to think the other way of what structures and systems have I created in my own organization that creates a challenge for Indigenous people to join. And so I've started kind of doing some cross-cultural communication where I'm working with organizations on how to make their, basically how to change the way that they operate and the way that they think in order to make it more accepting, and also working with Indigenous communities on kind of capacity building and really building their own strengths that come from their culture, that are really what a lot of people are looking for. And through that, there's, it opens up a bunch of really big questions that I don't have the answer to. I don't think anybody has the answer to, I'm having a hard time even communicating the issue, which is more along the lines of how do we change our cultures of business and operation. But I'll get into that, I'm sure, once we have a little bit more of the questions.
That's exactly, in the world of sustainability, we have started thinking with those three pillars: sustainability, the environmental, the economic, and the social. And I think since the economic pillar is so predominantly the focal point, it's time to elevate the social pillar, the voices, the human component. Thank you. We're going to have already some of your keywords written on the paper. We're going to include that. I'm going to give the floor to Jimmy Nutti. He's a Zuni tribal member, and he's also the chair of the board of trustees of the Grand Canyon Trust, and the CEO of the Colorado Plateau Foundation. I already had the honor of talking with him yesterday to get to know Jim a little bit better. Some conversations are best kept one-on-one, and some conversations should be in the wide open. So now we're going to create the first hybrid. Hello, Jim. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us and for honoring us with your presence. The floor is yours to show your knowledge, share your knowledge and your vision.
Thank you, Pamela. I think it is really fitting and timely as the world struggles with a pandemic and some political soul searching. I think now more than ever, the question, what information do we trust and value is profoundly relevant. Communications and the power of communications has been a tremendous epiphany for me over the past few years. And I feel very fortunate, coming to you here in Zuni, New Mexico, my hometown on the Zuni reservation here in the U.S. I'm not an Arctic person, but what I hope to contribute to this conversation is that I am a practitioner of a culture of land use, and I'm a farmer first, and actually my birthday will be in 3 days on the 28th, and this will mark my 65th consecutive year planting seeds. So my first year was when I was still an infant tied into a cradle board, and I was given some seeds and dropped seeds into the hole with my little baby hands. And after that, as an infant, still planting, as a young child, helping in the field. Later, after high school, I hitchhiked. For 2 years, I hitchhiked around the western U.S. and planted seeds as I went. And in university, I planted cilantro and onions and chilies outside the dormitory, and returned home to my field, my family's field, and I still plant today. So 65 consecutive years planting. So living in my hometown, a place where most people live within 2 minutes of every living relative and dead relative is a unique place and a unique experience. And I'm a 600th generation practitioner, so I feel proud about that. And so living in the same place and being amongst the same people, speaking the same language, listening to the same wind and experiencing the same seasons, generation after generation after generation, 600s can instill a unique kind of understanding, appreciation, and knowledge of the world around us. For example, I think of when I was young and we were getting water from springs and irrigating from springs. Those springs are drying up now. And my mother's side of the family were pottery makers. They made ceramics, and I used to watch them illustrate what they'd seen around them and their hopes on these ceramics. And when I look at them now, I see images of wetland birds, ibises and avocets, things like that on these ceramics, these old ceramics. But we don't see those birds anymore. When I see petroglyphs around here, sometimes there are turtle petroglyphs and there are fish petroglyphs. We don't see those anymore. But I see these things as messages to me that have been conveyed a long, long time ago, as a message for me to continue observing and to keep the beat. And so I feel very blessed. I've been able to travel and listen and learn from many people. I went to university. They gave me some great tools. and return home, and you see some books behind me, bookshelves. But also, I've had the pleasure and blessing, as I said, of growing up with my great-grandparents.
Recording in progress.
Who passed when I was 17 years old. And they lived much of their lives in the 1800s. So I grew up with people that were living and experienced and practiced in the 1800s. So I feel very fortunate. But so this also makes me feel like I'm riding two horses, gladiator style, one foot on a horse of modernity and a new world with different technical devices and ways of knowing, and the other foot on 600 generations of local knowledge. I think this is now then, it is about, if we're talking about working with people around education and human rights and ecotourism and all the rest that's important, I feel like this is a place where our collaboration should not be used so trivially, and too cavalierly. Collaboration to me is really about co-laboring and co-elaborating. And I look forward to this conversation that we'll have today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jim, I think one word that you said, or the term, political soul searching. Political soul searching. I think we should pause 1 second and think what that means. I don't think it's just political. I think it's a lot of humans too. We're not tied by a job. That's just a mask for some or a business card for others. And then I think the ceramics is really important, to get your hands dirty in that clay, right? To really have that relationship with the earth, with the sand. I do a little bit of pottery too, but I'm just dabbling, okay? I'm starting, but I hope maybe your ancestors can teach me, so I will be open to that. Thank you so much. We're gonna go and talk to another lady. We are gonna look forward to hear from Navarana Sorensen. We already had the pleasure of seeing you perform the drum dance on Friday, celebrating your ancestors, and the little girl spirit came out again, right? We have some pictures of that, so that will never be unseen. Navarana, you are a translator as well, and you're working with filmmakers. The Tule drum dance, that's what we saw with you. Can you give your microphone to Navarana? We just want to hear your wisdom and share the importance of passing knowledge from ancestors to today's peoples.
I'm just gonna, do you hear me? I'm just gonna introduce me just a little. I'm from Umanak, Turi. Our own Umanak, not West Greenlandic Umanak. Our own Umanak. I'm born in 1947, and I had 5 siblings when I was growing up. And my mom and dad, they were hunter and hunter wife. And they were always busy all day long and 24 hours a day, taking care of us. Because that time when I was born, the influence of foreign civilization, it wasn't that, what do you call it, fremskreden, was it? Yeah, thank you. So I watched my mom and dad learning the life up there from the University of the Nature. So because I never went to university, so I don't have any degrees I can be proud of, but I'm very proud of have learning from my mom and dad and Inuit from up there. And I'm very proud of being a part of that. And when I was 6, we was forced to move to another place further north. And when I was 9, I went to elementary school real first, and I was taken away from my mom and dad to the main city from our little settlement. The teachers and the priests there, they went to get us small kids from the settlements and took us to the boarding school in Ghana. And they said that we have to learn Danish because we were part of Denmark. And my mom and dad didn't want me to go because I was only 9, and I was also I'm also was the last, youngest one. But I remember that the priest said, when you go see her in few months or 3 months, you might not understand her because she might just be talking Danish. That's future, he said. But I went there, and we had, but I had a great time there because also the churches was very, very nice to us and took care of us, and we had like them as our parents in that little boarding school. But we had little uniforms like little soldiers. So, but we were taken care, and we learned a lot. Even that time, we also learned how to sew, how to take care of skin. And local women taught us that, us girls, and men taught the boys how to build a slate or whatever. So it was that time like that, and we learned Danish, Greenlandic, religion, and what do you call it, making food and kitchen. So we learned everything there, and I loved it because also we had every Christmas we had learned to perform with a theater, so the whole community could come and see us, and I loved this. I thought it was very exciting when I went to school because everything we made during the school year, they were taken very carefully and put together what I have done, like me, so they can put them out for show for the. They had a little audience the last school day for us, and so our parents can come and see what we had done during the school year. I love that because it means you have to try to do the best because I know that the people would look into my what I have done during the school year.
We're going to continue now with another speaker, Katie. I think the most important word that came out, or no, not the most, but that resonated with me. I think it resonated. The University of Nature. All right. So whoever thought that the 1 PhD or 1 master was sufficient, no. We're all going to go back to school, and we're all going to have to learn the language of Mother Earth, which is also a project that I have a beautiful card deck for, so people can get a full initiation. Martin?
Yeah, I just had, hopefully this is on. Yeah, I just had one comment that Navarana brought out, which I think is a significant one. So when our journey started out in terms of forming a hybrid model for education where we could be inclusive of indigenous knowledge, little did we realize that at the formation of this is really language. You know, if someone takes you away from your language and now tells you that your only pathway to learn is through another language, they are in a sense taking everything from you and just sliding it gently out of your feet. It would be as if I were being raised and suddenly at 9 years old someone said, "Martin, if the world is to open up to you, please learn Japanese." And I think the struggle of doing that is immense. I think it's enormous. And I think Indigenous people face this all over the world. Likewise, when I started out doing anthropology work, I noticed that religion was actually another foundation that came into communities all over the world. And again, religion is at the core of a person's existence. If you suddenly remove that and say, no, this is the pathway to get to your Creator, this is the pathway to God, what are we doing to people in terms of taking away their dignity, their rights to interpret the world as they see fit? So, Navarana, thank you for sharing that, because you have brought to life, and you did it with an open heart, so God bless you, because that's just who you are. But for those of us who look at it critically, this is monumental. You're removing people from their very existence, and it's a big deal.
Thank you, Martin, for highlighting that. And to this respect, we have another speaker, Losang Rabji. She holds a PhD in gender and anthropology from the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies, where she was the first Tibetan to become a Commonwealth scholar. And her organization is called Machik, which means one mother. I had the honor of already talking to Losang yesterday, because I always like to know people more. And here she is. Losang, please tell me more about your fabulous work and your mission in life.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Pamela. It's an honor to be here, and especially with the prior speakers. Really just so excited and thankful to have the chance to hear from and learn from you all. So our story begins with my parents. In around 1987, my parents took my sister and I. We are the co-founders of Machik, the nonprofit, and we were teenagers back then. And my parents decided that it was, they were factory workers. We didn't have much in terms of resources, but they made it a priority to take us to see Tibet. And it wasn't a time when a lot of people were going, but we were incredibly excited. It was a big question mark what we were going to see, and we of course went to Lhasa and visited various monasteries, etc. But the highlight for me, in a big way, was connecting with my grandmother, my father's mother, for the first time ever, and actually the only time I had a chance to be with her. And she taught us a lot in a very short time. And one of the memories that will never leave my being that she gave me was during a long walk up in the mountains. Our mountains are about 13,000 feet high, average, much higher in other places. And she told me, she pointed to the high alpine forest, and she pointed to a tree and said, before you cut a tree, you must apologize to the spirit of that tree and make a promise to that tree to use every bit of it for the best reasons possible. And growing up in a small town in Canada, I had never heard of such a thing from that exact perspective. My parents had always taught us a tremendous respect for the earth, but my grandmother had a way of articulating it. It shook me to my core. So about 10, 11 years later, after my sister and I continued on in school, to grad school, my parents made the decision to work with the local community and the local institutions to build the first mother tongue-based bilingual school in my father's home village. And if I'm going to try now to, I hope this works, to share with you the image, if I have permission to share. Okay, there we go. All right, so this was the school in my father's village of Chumba before 1998. and it was, as you can see, very small, very rudimentary. There were about 20 students there from a community of about 5,000 people in these beautiful mountains. And with a tremendous amount of support from many different people and many institutions, we finally now have a school with about 850 students boarding full-time. And the key thing here is that this is a mother tongue-based bilingual school. And for those of you who are familiar with it, please bear with me. Those of you who are not, this is vital aspect is the fact that the subjects that the students study are being taught through Tibetan language, their mother tongue. It's the language that they hear from, from inside the womb and from the moment they're out. Learning, they learn Chinese as well from the first year of school. We believe in multilingualism, and later on we also add some English. 3 very different language systems these children are being asked to learn. These are all children of farmers and pastoralists. 99% of the parents have never been to any kind of schooling. So this is a project of a very rapid change taking place in mother tongue-based education in a very short time. Short in the big picture, for me it feels like forever. It's been over 20 years now working on this project, and this year we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the opening of the primary school. So we're really grateful that this program, this project, this school has been flourishing. Despite many uncertainties in the area, the parents, first and foremost, trusted the project, and the children, of course, working very hard, the teachers, oh my goodness, and so many other factors involved in making this happen. There isn't time to go through all of it, but this school, in a very short time, has produced from the very first batch of students, a surgeon, 2 lawyers, many teachers, 13 of whom are now working full-time at the school where they entered as grade 1 students. It's the closing of a circle that we really just dreamed of many years ago, and looking forward to many more years of Tibetan language-based multilingual education. And so Martin mentioned earlier, I think everybody else mentioned as well, the vital importance of language in Indigenous education. And it's not only language. Of course, that's primary. It's a huge priority. However, the story about my grandmother's lesson, these are the kinds of values that are being taught about the importance of conservation and the importance of our connection to the land, our decentering us as the only people, as the only beings that matter, the importance of teaching responsibility to the land, to each other. These are some of the lessons that the children have a chance to learn when they have their mother tongue-based education, and also access to their fellow villagers, to their parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, etc., the knowledge bearers of the community. So again, this is a very short synopsis. It's been a long-term project, obviously, more than 20 years, and the results are ongoing. So I apologize for the very brief nature of the description, but I'm grateful for the chance to share this story, this reality for many hundreds of people. The school has influenced more than just one village. It's now become some kind of model that self-sustaining model that the schools and principals and education departments in the region have come to see, and many have taken certain aspects of the operation and even the construction of the school. Organic greenhouse, water heaters, solar water heaters, cultural performance groups within the education institution, so on and so forth. So many different aspects of the school's operation have had some influence on a regional level. And so for that, we're so encouraged for this to continue and be a positive influence in the region. One of the, not directly related to this school, but in general, in a wider viewpoint from across the Tibetan plateau, ecotourism has taken off. I think there's always room for growth, but there are a number of excellent, incredibly high quality Tibetan-owned and operated ecotourism organizations. One that I will mention because many people already know about it is called Songzam, founded by a brilliant Tibetan entrepreneur who is passionate about Tibetan language and culture and arts. And I invite you to check out his website. Maybe I can share that with the organizers and they can pass it on to you if you're interested. And he has helped make incredible inroads into how not just to offer excellent services that are from a group owned and operated by Tibetans, as well as other people, but founded by a Tibetan, but also showing how Tibetans can very expertly and beautifully interpret Tibetan culture, both in a traditional and contemporary way, through the ecotourism sector. Again, many challenges and uncertainties, but there is an incredible spirit among the Tibetan people to continue to find ways to share, to strengthen our language and culture, and also to share it with others in a constructive way. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Losang Rabji. And I think, again, the highlight of what our grandparents share, I heard you, Jason, about memories that create you joy. Jim also planting seeds as a baby. What are we teaching our kids today, and how are we teaching them? Again, we're coming back to education, but we also now started talking about ecotourism, and that is why it's a great honor to also have an expert and another fabulously educated person, Hjörtur Sverrisson, educated in several ways, degrees in anthropology from the University of Iceland, political sciences from Lund University in Sweden, and then also business and economic development from the Copenhagen Business School in Denmark. You were the former director, CEO of Visit Greenland, so you have spearheaded some amazing initiatives, both Iceland and Greenland. So let's see how ecotourism can be a place that fosters education and that also would preserve, heritages as well as respect the natural boundaries. Hjörtur, present a little bit about your background, about your experiences, and thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pamela, and it's an honor to be here and to be in this company. It's a true pleasure, and in this room, you gave a fantastic presentation of that, Martin. So my name is Hjörtur Sverrisson. I come from Iceland, grew up in the northwest corner of Iceland, just under the Arctic Circle, in a tiny little fishing village. Started my career as a forklift operator as well. Seems to be the way into ecotourism. I've worked around the world, Greenland and Iceland, as you mentioned, all of the Nordics in the Arctic, and even Russia, in Nepal, Middle East, and Africa, and other places. And I think, as we've spoken about here, all of you have mentioned the indigenous knowledge and what is preserved in language is so important. I know for me, and in the fjord where I grew up, there's this little valley which has had some folklore about stories that took place there that are 1,000 years old. And just a few years ago, archaeologists started to dig and search for evidence of these stories, and they turned out to be all true. And I think, again, that shows us these were events that happened 1,000 years ago. They were never written down, but because you had the same people living there with the same language, the story was preserved and the knowledge was preserved. And this is of so much importance to recognize the indigenous knowledge in the places and the importance of language to preserve it. And in a way, we are going through the great knowledge extinction at the moment, with everything that is being lost with knowledge. I think you mentioned the dog sled that is here, and Peary and Henson and Amundsen and their achievements. And I think, in a way, this has been an inspiration for me. I've loved the exploration stories, and to begin with, I always read them from the Western perspective. But later on, I started to learn that there was so much more to it. And I just want to mention that the event that took place here on Friday is of enormous importance, the inauguration of the Society of Forgotten Explorers, which recognizes this indigenous knowledge, which is the background for everything that has been achieved. The four Inuit hunters that had the knowledge and the experience to reach the North Pole. It was their technology, it was their innovations, whether it's kayaks or dog sledding or the right clothing and the hunting. And even when we look at the South Pole, where it's Scott and Amundsen who are competing to reach there, who is it that makes it successfully? It's Amundsen. And why is that? He lived for a year with Inuit in Nunavut, and he learned to live like them, he learned to travel like them, he learned to dress like them, and that is why, one of the main reasons why he was successful in reaching the South Pole. So even though it's a Norwegian that reaches the South Pole, in reality, it's indigenous knowledge that reaches the South Pole. And in my role as the head of Visit Greenland, I've tried to tell that story because I think it's important that people are acknowledged for the knowledge. Because science has had a really hard time acknowledging this. And I think, in a way, we've seen, like Navarana described, at the age of 9, she was taken from her family and put into a Danish school system. Greenland has taken a very important step in changing the school system so that it is primarily in Greenlandic today, which is a very, very important step. But it still leaves big challenges. In East Greenland and in Northern Greenland, you have different languages. And now, if I take East Greenland as an example, which is the region I know maybe the best, you have children that at the age of 6 start school. The local language is East Greenlandic. The school is now in West Greenlandic. But the teachers, because it's difficult to find qualified teachers, many of them only speak Danish. To put it into context, it's like if you as an English child, you go into school and all the school books are in German. Because, well, it's close enough, but the teachers speak Japanese. And then you're surprised, well, why don't they finish higher education? Why don't they go onwards in the school system? Well, it's difficult. And when you go out of the school system, you need to change languages, and it creates a barrier. And I know this very well from Greenland, but this is also something I've seen in Africa. There's a big challenge there with the same. You have the native languages. I'm not taking too long.
No. We're just nodding and saying yes to what you're saying. We're affirming and confirming.
But I think if I bring this back into ecotourism, I think in Greenland we are seeing the impact of climate change. It's really, this used to be the people who were at the forefront in adapting to an extreme climate. The Greenlanders are the people who are at the forefront to adapting to extreme climate change. The temperature rise has been 3 times the global average. The ice is melting, the sea ice is changing, your way of livelihood is disappearing, and therefore the knowledge is disappearing as well. Dog sledding, there were 35,000 sled dogs in 1991, there are 15,000 left. It is disappearing, and it's knowledge that has been gained and developed for 6,000 years. And we cannot make that disappear. And I think Greenlanders cannot stop climate change. It's a much bigger issue than that. They can contribute, maybe. But it's important that we figure out ways, and I think ecotourism is a very important way to take that knowledge and find new ways of continuing that knowledge into the future. So it has an important role so that the locals and the natives can take pride in that knowledge and they can use it to something that can provide for their family onwards.
Thank you so much. This was just to whet your appetite. Okay, now we're going to go to second level of this panel. But I also wanted to make sure that we are going to include the voice of Ole Jørgen Hammerken. Ole's wife is here as well. I had a wonderful conversation with Ole yesterday. He's also a club member. He currently is in Denmark, but he has really understood that media, because he's also an actor, but he's also he worked on the movie Inuk, which I think His Serene Highness from Monaco also contributed to. So you start to see that we're all finding ways to each other, and now I think it's time for the truth to come to a much larger platform. So what do we teach our kids? How do we teach our children, and why? Right now the why is Mother Earth survival, one, but actually mostly first human survival, because Mother Earth is 4.5 billion years old. She'll be around. It's really us understanding that our impact has transitioned from a crisis to an opportunity. We all have to make our hands dirty, learn the science, whether it's coming from traditional knowledge. So we have to listen more and talk less, listen to our ancestors, respect the knowledge of our ancestors, and integrate great platform where technology will allow us to connect and to grow and to expand. Would you like to share a word with us while you're here and come to the front? Yes, as well. So then we have an official voice for Ole, and I will just give you my seat for a second, or Martin, if you want to be so kind and give the lady your seat. Thank you very much. And share a little bit about your amazing husband who has done many expeditions, who knows how to communicate and still be rooted in his vast knowledge pool. Please share some more information.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Orion Hammerken was born in Nuuk 65 years ago, and he actually traveled with his family all around the country because his father was a priest, and so they lived in the south, in the east, in the north, pretty much everywhere. And when he was 13 years old, exactly like Navarana have been describing her own childhood, but that happened at 9, when she was 9 years old. Somebody came to his house and they said, the boy is really good at school and he needs to go to Denmark. So I saw the pictures. Some of the relatives took the picture of a little boy. He was very short at that time, not as tall as now. So he was standing near the window, holding the curtain. They had a curtain exactly like that, and crying. And his sister, who is older, she says that he has been crying for 3 days until he had to go on the plane and fly to Denmark. And then he told me so many stories about how that first year in Denmark was for him, how he actually, something broke inside of him because he had to turn into the second-class Danish citizen. He could not be himself any longer. He was not allowed to speak his own language, and he had to become somebody else, which he was not. So later on, when he graduated from school again, he was a very good student, so he was invited to go to Denmark and study at the university, which he did, but his heart was always taking him back to Greenland, and that's why right after he finished, he worked for a couple of years as a lawyer, and he decided to go back and try to be who he really was. So he became a teacher, an educator. He was working with the most neglected kids who really didn't know how to come back because of climate change, because of societal change. A lot of these kids who come from the north and move with their parents down south, they really lose the ground under their feet. And then there are a lot of problems, alcoholism and everything else. So he actually was working a lot with these kids through a very special method. He was taking them on his dog sled and taking them into the nature, into the wilderness, where there was nobody around, and staying with them for a week or two just together before these kids would be sent to live in a small, very small settlement with a family of hunters before they make a return to the society. And some of these kids became so successful. You know, we meet them all across Greenland, and they remember these expeditions. So, but I wanted to add a couple more things about our discussions, because we talk all the time. Actually, we have a very good friend in Greenland, and he happens to be one of the two most prominent geologists of Greenland, and his name is Uri Christiansen, and he used to be the head of Nuna Minerals, and he's just like an absolutely brilliant scientist. And we always ask him why there are so few geologists in Greenland when Greenland needs so many geologists. And there are very many hypotheses about that, why really kids don't want to study. Like in our family, in Nuuk, we have two youngsters who wanted to become geologists. They applied and they started studying, but then they gave up 1 year later. So we work not only in Greenland, but also in Siberia, specifically in Yakutia, and we see the very big difference there. And it's very interesting. We work in the smallest settlements, separated from everything else because of climate change. There are no ways in and out for at least 5 months. But kids in those settlements, miraculously, they're very interested in hard sciences. So, but why? And the answer is the following: because Siberia, Yakutia specifically, was a place for exile for all political, dissidents from Poland and from Russia, and the teachers of the parents of the kids today were hard scientists at school, because they just like, what do they do? They would just like were teachers there. And so the signal comes from the parents and grandparents. They say you have to really be interested in hard sciences. And so that's why we see a lot of kids coming from those regions, from the smallest of the settlements, with a desire to study physics, mathematics, artificial intelligence. In Greenland, thank God, Greenland has never been a gulag place. It's a free country. And really, there, you have to understand what kids are really related to. They're related to their family, to their grandfathers and grandmothers, and to nature. Again, so we were always looking at nature as a big classroom where you can find a connection pretty much with everything, including hard sciences. I will give one very short example of what we were able to do last summer, fall, and winter on Disco Island and also in Ilulissat. We were asked to work with young scouts, teaching them some emergency evacuation techniques. And we were doing that. So we were working with ropes, with understanding how you can stay safe if you fell into water, so on. And I can tell you the kids were as good as us and much better than us. They knew how to use ropes, they knew everything. But the teachers with whom we worked in school, they said, we have problems with history. For example, here in Kekatarssuaq, one of the biggest ever existing Greenlandic explorers, Sture Sak, known to the world as Hans Hendrik, he is literally unknown to the kids. And what can we do that the kids study more history, their own history? And we decided to reconstruct the expedition of Hans Hendrik, Sture Sak, the Polaris expedition, using some very small things in the nature. We actually, we were thinking about the time when Hans Hendrik was drifting on the small floe of ice, which was becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And he was able to save the lives of Americans and Europeans during that fantastic expedition, which lasted almost 6 months in the conditions of the polar night. And it's because of the Inuit talent and knowledge, all these Europeans and Americans were saved. So once we put just simple sheets, which you use at home, And we started folding them, that the sheet becomes smaller and smaller, and the kids were standing on that sheet, and suddenly, like the group of 12 kids, they could not stand there any longer. So they had to hold each other, balance, and so it was so exciting. Then next morning, all these kids started reading the autobiography of Surisak, Hans Hendrik. He was the very first explorer in Greenland who wrote his own autobiography in Greenlandic language. And here again we come to the language, because for them it was so important to start reading in their own language, and then they started looking on Google like in different other languages, and then the story came up. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Again, intergenerational, passing on the knowledge, those are the key words. And what do we teach our children and why? And I think the why is, let's move towards removing the obstacles. But Martin, you wanted to share something with the group?
Yes, another theme is coming out here that I think is important to mention. We've talked about the language, but what's equally important, I've been with the National Science Foundation for a long time reviewing proposals, and one of the mandates of the National Science Foundation is to get more Indigenous people involved in science. And interestingly enough, I gave a talk there, and you know, the critique comes when you start interviewing in Inuk, and they tell you something that's pretty profound to your research. I've been doing narwhal research for 20 years. I must tell you that I have brought Inuit on my papers, not in the acknowledgments, but as authors, because I realize that what I carry is not the insight to understand something, but I'm just a translator from them to the academic world to get there. But the critique I always hear is, well, in one case, it's one person telling you one thing. Why should we deal with that? Science is predicated on having one variable that we can replicate multiple times. And I always tell them, I must tell you that every single thing I've ever heard from an Inuit regarding that traditional knowledge has been 100% true. And I tell them the reason why is because their lives depend on it. It's not something that is just trivial and academic. They don't take a book out of a library, read it, and put it back. They're on some trip, and they may not come back. And oftentimes they do not come back. And the more they understand that knowledge, I don't know for those of you who are familiar with the tidal wave that happened in Thailand and the Moken people, but one elder was able to read the tidal wave hours before it came, and all the Moken people went out to sea. Great example, because in science, with all the technology to detect weather, look what happened to everybody else on the land. No one read that except one Moken. The other question, just a quick story, but when I was up in the high Arctic, I was with the hunter David Ignaciak, wonderful personality, great guy, and we were out viewing narwhals on the ice floe, and we were there for 2 weeks. And the reason why this story is important is it shows the dichotomy between science and traditional knowledge. So we're out there for 2 weeks. We're in one spot. I'm seeing people flying by us on snowmobiles and all kinds of documentary teams. They've got hydrophones with them. And at one point, I looked at David, because we had just been staying in one place the whole time. We didn't move at all. And so I looked at David with this discerning look and just going, do they know something that we don't know? And I remember David's face, because there was this long pause and looking at me like, you really want to ask that question? And his answer was, they can go wherever they want. The narwhals will be coming here. And sure enough, I would say about 4 or 5 days later, we saw hundreds of narwhals. Now, the story is interesting because there were 2 documentary teams up there from very famous television stations. We go back after, several weeks on the ice. They're all despondent. Their heads are just down. We were out there for 3 weeks. We didn't see any whales. We brought all this photographic equipment. We brought all our technology. We brought all our wits. I'm with one Inuk. I see hundreds of whales. So there you have it. You either want the experience to interface with nature. These are the PhDs. So I just wanted to tell that story quickly because I think it's important.
That is actually fabulous, because we're all a product, so to speak, from our culture, from our time, from our era. I'm born less than a year, it's going to date me, I'm so sorry, but I'm actually proud, after the first Earth Day. Okay, 1970, April 22nd was the very first Earth Day. 20 million Americans came to march on campuses everywhere. People started uniting. So that is one cultural movement that started. But I also grew up with fairy tales from Tibet. I grew up with mythology from around the world. Thank you, Dad. You heard that, right? And also tribal African art. So for me, it's normal, you know, to walk by a sakalawa from Madagascar or to have a head of a Buddha in the living room and just sense maybe also the spirit of those ancestors, and definitely through osmosis of that knowledge, just be accepting that as a normalcy. And I hope that with that cultural curriculum that we're going to, you know, continue creating with the inclusion of all of you, because we all need to add that stone. We're all unique, but I want to also start thinking on how we start to take away the barriers, because we still have roadblocks. But crisis equals opportunity. So I have hope and a great vibe that the future can be great. You wanted to share something with the group?
Yeah, because I had written lots of acknowledgement, but of course I forgot at the time. The time is running fast. I just want to say that before municipality offices, municipalities was 18 in Greenland. Now there are only 4, and after that, the educational exchanges between making a British are gone, because nobody from these big municipalities are not sharing so much knowledge things with the schools, elementary schools. Now it's gone, and the small children used to go to another communities or to Denmark to their friendship towns. It was very helpful for the children also to experience that. That's otherwise I also just want to say that thank you so much because you let me. I have to go in a minute because I have to leave soon.
Oh, good, because then we can do rotating chair. Aviak, would you like to join us on the?
We're going to have Paningwek.
Yeah, but we have to see them, so there has to be. Somebody should come on the chair. Let's put it that way. Who of the 2 girls is going to come up in the front? There we go, and then.
Yeah, I just have a little comment about University of Nature and traditional knowledge. Well, I can do a quick
introduce yourself.
My name is Beningwa. I am a traditional practitioner of our markings. So I get to connect with many of the indigenous people in Greenland where we share traditional knowledge. A word that, something that we keep mentioning today but not fully addressing it is that each Inuit contains traditional knowledge, and knowledge that is maybe a little hard to understand to people who are not connected to the nature. I want to share a little and short story that as I spoke to a hunter, and we spoke about education, because many people who are educated comes to Greenland as experts, but it doesn't really resonate with the knowledge that we as indigenous people contain. And they say they have been educated for 10 years and 12 years, and still they seem to not fully understand the full picture of the indigenous people. So I asked the hunter, how long does it take for a hunter to be well educated? And he was silent for a moment, and then he answered, it takes 7 generations at least. to be a good hunter, to read the nature, to read the weather, it's so much in our body. We have so much body memories, and through our native language and to the connection to the elders and for the elder generations, those knowledge are passed down to us. So it's so important to maybe reconsider the educational system that resonates with the indigenous people and the traditional knowledge, and maybe create new education options that resonates with traditional knowledge.
Well, I think we have to add another important sentence on the board that you have just mentioned. We all know about the decision that you have to consider the generations after you, the 7 generations after you. That's the footprint, right? But now you just added a tremendous additional piece. You have to listen to the ancestors 7 generations up. So our reality is just expanded in a split second into a much larger, I would say, domain. I think after this we're going to open the floor, we're going to open the floor exactly to some questions. But one question to all of you from the panel. What roadblocks do we need to take? And you can start and present yourself also. You can take that question to kick off, to bite off the conversation, and also share, of course, a little bit of your knowledge, please. The floor is yours.
Hi. It's on. Okay. My name is Avia Hinson, and I am great-granddaughter of Matthew Hinson. And I'm very pleased to be invited here by you. And I am a teacher, and I have bachelor degree and master degree in pedagogy and in the teaching. Okay, I can recognize of all the things that you have said. They are very yes, I can recognize it, all of it. And give me a question. Give me a question.
Well, I always say it's an Asian proverb: crisis equals opportunity. And once you start to open your entire heart and your mind to all the cultures, where you really become a product of osmosis, I would say, great things come. So crisis equal opportunities. What roadblocks? What do we need to take away? What's in the way of a pure hybrid model where all cultures can feel home? What do we need to get rid of?
Okay, my mother tongue is Greenlandic, Inuit. And my first foreign language is Danish. And English is my second foreign language. So I started to learn English when I was in 7th grade. And I started to learn my first foreign language, Danish, in 4th grade. So in Greenland, there's a little group in self-government who developed the new words that comes to us. There's a one word that I don't understand that they need to translate, like they need to make a new word in Greenlandic. Something like what? I need a
new word? Are we going to create a new word today? It's getting more and more exciting by the minute, and we need your input, all of you.
Before I can answer your question, you need to tell me.
Well, you can think about it. We can marinate it and maybe ask from the people at home on the other side of the computer, and that would be Jim. And then, of course, also, Jim, we start with you, and then Losang. Do you hear us at the moment?
Sure.
Jim, please. What are
Yes.
the obstacles? What are the obstacles so we can create opportunity?
I think some obstacles, and let me first put this into a container.
Absolutely.
That with all our best intentions, we know our work is sublime and sacred. And I think one obstacle among many, first one, is our friends and our partners, our non-native friends and partners must take care to not romanticize our work and our lives. That I believe we do not need affirmation. What we need is better listening. And in other words, to build more trust and understanding. I think the other is in the world of science and traditional native knowledge, we must be careful about trying to bring them together. Because when we try to bring science and traditional native knowledge together, what may happen and what oftentimes happens is we subjugate traditional knowledge to an ethnoscience. We end up with ethnobotany, ethnoastronomy, ethno-something, and through it, so then our traditional knowledge ends up looking through the lens of science. And I'm not disparaging science. I'm trained as a scientist in the university myself, but also, as I said, I live in my hometown and 65 years as a farmer. So in trying to bring things together, science, traditional knowledge, all these requires attention to being mediators, to mediate knowledges so that one doesn't eclipse the other. I think another is, talking about roadblocks and obstacles, is if we approach our work thinking in terms of projects. At my time in life, I am no longer so much interested in projects because a project has a beginning and an end. At this time in my life, I am more interested in movements, long-term change. So I would say be careful about only thinking in terms of projects. And I think another is, and around the human rights area, is that much of the work is being put forward by NGOs, right? And governments as well. But some of those major and large NGOs need to make some changes, right? To be more inclusive and equitable. And so those boards, those trustees, those are the ones who make policy and monitor policy. At those levels, things need to change. So I see those as the major obstacles, but I think we can start to take those things down. We can be mindful not to loop back into some old discourse, but as Native peoples, remember that our ancestors, and even today, when things were difficult, we would stand up and get in lines and conjure old words and the beings all around us and put one foot in front of the other and move. So we are serious and we are capable. We just need people to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Exactly. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And I know I'm known to be a talker, so somebody once told me, use them accordingly. Listen more, speak less. And the power of listening will empower you. And not right away have your answer ready, but let it sink in. Think 1, 2, 3. Let it sit and sink. And yes, Martin?
Just one housekeeping note. For those of you online, we've got quite a few people. If you want to submit questions, it's Kathy with a K, K-A-T-H-Y, at stanford.edu. Because of the volume of questions, we'll get to them later if we don't get to them on this workshop.
something very important also that Jim said, we are doing sacred work. That is extremely important. And with the blocks, I'm going to go a little bit more metaphysical. I'm talking about energy blocks. Because energy will always flow. It's like water in a stream. And energy, to me, also equals spirit. And so our spiritual flow, I think, is also something that we need to think about. In my conversation with Ole Hemmeken, we really touched into the spiritual realm. And I'm getting very touched when even speaking this way, because my spirit is acting up a little bit as I honor her or him or it. It's time to also make a separation between religion and spirit. Every person has a own practice that is intimate, and so that's why conversations are wonderful one-on-one. Obstacles, what kind of obstacles? So Jim gave already an important note of what that looks or doesn't look like. You wanted to share something about that?
Yes, you said what we should remove to make it all work together across the earth, but the truth is that it's not really possible that way, because indigenous people's culture is shaped and formed by its environment, and they learn to live off the land in a sustainable way. That sustainability might not work in other places, like just food as an example. Like vegetarian food is not sustainable in the Arctic as the paleo diet is. So I think we should respect each area's way of living and its knowledge and the culture, and not assimilating all of it in together.
Thank you very much. So different locations call for different methods, so we're going to think local again, right? You wanted to share something, Jason?
Yeah, and one thing I'm going to I have to go back a little bit. For a lot of young indigenous people, there's a very strong internal conflict, and I think Jim actually mentioned it, where you're, especially today, you're expected to become very well educated, succeed in kind of a Western or Southern, in a lot of our cases, world, while also still maintaining strong cultural practices. And that creates a very strong internal conflict and tension in young people today. And what I tend to see, which I find a very interesting dynamic, is a lot of these young people are, I find there's a lot of just kind of training or junior positions that are offered to indigenous, to organizations or people that are looking to build their capacity. And I often hear, what can we do? And I'm going to super summarize an example because I find it funny. Well, a very common one that I hear is, I can provide training to you that's going to be very beneficial to me that you have it. And if you break down the conversation, I mean, it goes more than that, but it's quite funny that's often, it's what can benefit me by you having. And one thing, it's interesting. I like that, because one thing I think we can do, we can cross off that indigenous, the second one down, capacity building, rather than indigenous capacity building. And I think that's like a lot of the work that I'm doing now, because there's a very fine line between a definition of capacity building and assimilation. And assimilation is a topic we've touched on quite a bit now today. And that capacity building, one of my strongest recommendations to people who are looking to work together, to bring knowledge together, is to really do a critical check of your intentions. So that you're not just collecting things that you know you need to succeed, rather than breaking everything down in order to a place where it can start to build.
And then after assimilation, also very important is integration. How do you make sense of it all?
We've had a question from our online audience that maybe is appropriate to pose here, but it seems also that in terms of the delivery of education, primarily most indigenous cultures are either oral or visual, and we are throwing textbooks at you. Are there recommendations from you, if there were knowledge, how it best translates and would be engaging for someone? I don't know if any of you want to take a stab at that.
I have a perfect example, actually, I was in university, but I dropped out because it was too crazy. And I remember in high school and the education system, and I can only speak for Canada, but it doesn't really do justice to a lot of Inuit. It's all southern-based curriculum that we're following, and there's no real thing that engages us in something that's real in our lives. And I remember learning biology, and our biologist, we get a rotation of teachers, and we were having a hard time with it, and he couldn't figure out how to engage us. So then one day we came to school, and my dad was there, and we all went out caribou hunting, and as we were processing the caribou, our biology teacher was taking things out, and he was showing us how it worked. We ate all the parts that we were learning about, and still to this day I understand fully how the heart works because of that one lesson. And it was, again, he was trying to find a way to make it accessible to us, not a way that he could just give the information the way he wanted.
But also for hundreds of years we have experienced that foreign people have been describing and disseminating our people and our culture. Written language is new to us, but it's new times that we are beginning to take the mic and to be the one describing our own people and our values and who we are as people. So I think it will also affect the educational system when we start to read books written by our own people to our own people. And I think it will definitely benefit people who are not Inuit too.
So there's room for more storytelling?
Yes, I have. Okay. As I said before, that language is, as you also have mentioned, that language could be barrier to learn, to have, to study, and to have an education. I used to teach young adults in business school, and we used Danish books about business. And I have also met several students, students from other places than Nuuk, who used to tell me, I can learn the object because I don't understand the words. And I used to tell them, you need to stop see the Danish language as a barrier. You need to see the Danish language as a tool. You have to maintain your goal, the education you want, and stop looking at the Danish language as a goal to have an education. So I used to tell them that. They don't really believe me, but I used to tell them, I am like you. My lack of using my lack of the foreign languages, I don't see it as a barrier. my goal used to always be the education that I wanted. And I have another vision, how we can learn the new generation to have an education, to maintain their interest, to want to learn something. The new generation are very into the social media. They use TikToks and other things that are technology. I was thinking about of course I want to publish a book about the four Inuits and Matthew Hinton and Robert Peary, but only not that. I also want to find a group maybe where we can develop technology, like where they could learn about Matthew Hinton on TikTok, or they could learn others about history in social media. We could develop that, and maybe we could also develop apps that could catch the interest of the young people that we have. We don't only have to use the books. We can also find another ways to learn, to teach our children and the young people.
Yeah, thank you about the education. Thank you about sharing that way forward of what could be possible.
A few minutes story also, because when I translate for people from all over the world, they go to see this hunter or his wife, want to interview them. So first time they always say, "Sorry, you don't speak my language." That's the foreigner says to these people, my people. So therefore, they say, "Therefore, I'm bringing a translator with me." So, so I said to them politely, "I think you should say this: sorry, I don't speak your language." Because I'm foreigner. Sorry, I don't speak your language, so I have to interview with the translator.
Well, we all speak the same language, and this is to just find communality. The word authentic came out. And if we all understand that each and one of us has a talent, go explore your talent and deliver your mission in life with passion. And I have an Eco Hero challenge for youth that is a practical program where you apply the knowledge of Mother Earth and you create practical little programs. I want to invite all of you to look into that, to get youth around the world connected. I'm training 1,000 voices in 10 countries. So we can all check out further the results on my magazine, which is launching next week, the Sustainable Styles magazine. And we're going to include all these voices as well. So this is just the beginning of a dialogue where we can find each other as a global community. Martin?
We started late, but I'm going to take one more question from the audience, and that was how can scientists better approach indigenous knowledge, incorporating it into their work? And I think it'd be nice to hear from some of our visitors who are, in that representation. So,
I really like that you address a lot of the credit to the Inuit that you are learning from, and I think that's a good way to process it, to address that that what you know is a fraction of what the people know, because what we experience in the Arctic is that the people are not getting the credit of the knowledge they are giving. I think when experts is coming to our people to do research, they gather a lot of knowledge that they take ownership of, but I think it's good for the experts to address that knowledge to the indigenous people and not take ownership of that knowledge.
Yeah, very good comment. I think we're going to have to close our session here. I want to thank all of you who came here and visited to the Explorers Club. I want to thank everybody online and whatever time zone you're in. Thank you for joining us as well. If you have additional questions, like I mentioned, please address them to Kathy with a K, ATHY at stanford.edu. We will get to every question and respond to you. Thank you very much all for coming, and cheers for a great day.
We're gonna take a flag photo because if you know my programs, I have created the flag of Eco Hero, where we have one planet without boundaries, because we should all be heroes for our planet, and we already did. This is gonna look like this. Blue, you're gonna be happy, Navarana. And if everybody can come on the front, this is basically what it looks like. Everybody going on the front for a group photo? Come on, everybody. This is the whole world. Everybody is one talented voice. And thank you so much for the audiences. I hope you're still here for this exciting photo. We are all eco-heroes. Who's taking the photo? There we go. Oh, I saw our camera. Heroes for the ecology. Heroes for the new economy. Thank you so much, and see you soon. All right. Wow, this is the best flag photo ever. We don't need committees for this flag. No. It's right away.
You didn't have to apply.
It's just the one
flag.
Oh, thank you so much.